Good afternoon, everybody. As John says, this afternoon's session with me is a cosy fireside chat with Shaun on the subject of FAST as a way to attract new viewers to Banijay's global content IP. Those of you who had to listen to me this morning know that I like to lean into discussions about how content distribution businesses and content owners are trying to navigate the world. So I think this is a continuation of that, which is great. Just to give it a little context, I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with Banijay, but they are a small little company that made 3.21 billion euros last year. Their distribution revenues last year were significantly boosted by the fact that they increased their small catalogue of 160,000 hours of content with another 8,000 hours through buying Beyond. I'm not sure what you got also from the fact that you bought 15 other companies in 10 other markets, including Italy, the UK, Germany, and I think some UK, US-based companies. So they are, I'm not misusing the term when I say a powerhouse when it comes to content. Perhaps more easily, they make things like Peaky Blinders, Survivor, MasterChef, Rogue Heroes, Pointless. So you're all familiar with their content. And Shaun is VP of Digital Rights at Banijay. He oversees the distributor's digital self-publishing activities, if to broadly do it. And maybe, just to kick it off, we're here to talk about FAST. I've actually had the pleasure of talking to Shaun about FAST a few times, and it was over a year ago, we did a podcast when Shaun was talking about this. So it's fair to say they've been doing this for a while because he was talking about that activity then, not just starting. But perhaps you could just give us a bit of background on FAST and Banijay's activities.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Jack, for that warm welcome. So, of course, from Banijay Rights' perspective, we currently have 21 unique FAST channels live across the globe. And they have been syndicated into 80 different streams as well. So those key territories that we've published our FAST channels in are the United States, the UK, Canada, Brazil, France, Germany, and more recently across Australia and New Zealand. So certainly a footprint across the globe and really working with that rich back catalogue, which of course Jack has just mentioned.
That's great. Well, this morning we kind of briefly talked about the different types of channels, but not much. I think it'd be good to understand how your different channels are growing and doing. And I know you have a cross-section of services. So you have single IP channels like Deal or No Deal and McLeod's Daughters. Perhaps more interestingly for some, because there aren't as many of them, you have a general channel, your Horizons Powered by Banijay channel. Perhaps you could talk about how each of those have been working out. I think I was a bit flippant this morning when I was talking about Warner Brothers Discoveries and some of their channels that they'd launched, and the fact that kind of I felt the brands didn't do what they say on the tin. And I think in FAST, one of the things everyone has been saying, although love to have the evidence, is that anecdotally the really clear, simple propositions work. But tell us more about what your different channels have been doing.
No, it's a very fair point to ask, Jack. And absolutely, when we're thinking about launching FAST channels, there's two focuses: commercial and editorial. So the great thing about Banijay Rights, of course, is that we're working with all the local sales teams, and we're working with that rich IP, which we're aiming to have, obviously, already a market presence. So we take our FAST channel strategies on a case-by-case basis, and of course, by territory basis. So when Jack, you just mentioned, we've got a mixture of single IP-focused FAST channels, which really are driven by those local formats in those major territories we've previously just mentioned. So in the US, for example, we've launched a dedicated single IP channel to Deal or No Deal, which is the US format. We've also got single IP channels led out to Fear Factor, McLeod's Daughters, Survivor, The Biggest Loser. So we've really got a strategy where we're either looking at that rich volume-driven IP, which has had a first or second or third window run in the territory, and then ultimately speaking, what's next. And for us, what was next was to look at an aggregation. And we've done a number of these aggregation channels now, either here in the UK, as Jack, you mentioned, with Horizons, which is really our flagship channel focusing on our UK entertainment back catalogue, but as well also in Germany, we've launched a scripted dubbed drama channel, as well as also a couple of aggregation channels with our locally produced native speaking German content as well.
That's great. And you mentioned, you dropped in there a few points about windows and content windows. Obviously, Banijay has a huge amount of Banijay Rights. There's a huge amount of activity when it comes to kind of making and selling content in lots of different places. And I think it's fair to say that predominantly Fast has been a place for catalogue and archive, certainly when it started, and we're seeing some nice innovations, but it's still fundamentally library. But for you, how does Fast, how does it fit into the rights marketplace for Banijay? It kind of, is it incremental, traditional distribution, using kind of ring-fenced content that otherwise was kind of less active? Or are you kind of trying to carve out the windows and be busy trying to optimize revenues?
Well, I think absolutely it is for the wider windowing strategy. Again, we've always positioned it as incremental revenues currently from fast channel exploitation, and that's really where the benefit we're seeing from leveraging that back catalogue. So they may be shows or formats which currently aren't commissioned, and we're leveraging those seasons which may have fallen out of license. But again, in line with the wider windowing and distribution strategy. So for us, we're really looking at this as an incremental play. But then in terms of how we launch a fast channel, whether it be single IP or whether it be aggregation, we're certainly taking those shared learnings of, for launching channels, you need volume, and you also need an editorial and programming strategy. So from our standpoint, we're really only looking to launch single IP fast channels that have, say, more than 150 hours of content readily available, and then for an option of refresh. So at times, it's about really looking at editorially what makes sense to launch as a single IP versus an aggregated channel instead.
And can you share any kind of insight on what kind of content is working, or maybe working better, or just working in that area?
No, of course, absolutely. You know, we're seeing great success with our non-scripted formats, very much in the game show sector. And I think when we look at Horizons as a very good case study here in the UK, again, really full of rich UK content where we are programming to a sense of a traditional linear playout. You know, we're really focusing on those time shifts, and we're thinking about what is our prime time scheduling, what is our daytime scheduling, what's our post-watershed. And we're really taking that data back and then programming accordingly. So really rich single IP channels or titles, including Location, 8 out of 10 Cats, Benidorm. We're really seeing good success, of course, with those shows too.
That's good to hear. In fact, I was just having a conversation with someone else at one of your competitor, I guess, sort of, companies outside, and he was sort of saying similar things about the fact that they were having to kind of get hold of that data to monitor performance and basically continue to improve the schedule, because a lot of us are flying blind on this. This is a new space. Are you finding that flow of data coming back well enough so that you can kind of improve the scheduling and what you're doing with the content?
I think it's on a case-by-case basis, depending obviously on platform needs, and also then from technical standpoints about CDN ownership. But every time we do get data back, it is absolutely reviewing on a daily basis. We're looking at the schedules, and we're almost looking at the overnights. And it's about using that data and making those collective decisions. So if we see, especially on an aggregation, that a certain season is performing well from one of our back catalogue titles, of course, the answer for us will be to look at additional seasons, or thinking about how we can get more prominence of that title potentially within the schedule itself. But it really is looking at those day parts and taking that data back and programming accordingly.
Great, great. I've got a few more questions, but sharpen your pencils because I'll come to the floor, and if any of you have questions, we'll give you the chance in a minute. This is another thing that was mentioned this morning in my session, but also actually there was another session with Graham Hay from ITV Studios, and he spoke on this very nice and clearly, but there are multiple ways you can work with FAST. You can launch your own channel and try to distribute it as wide as possible on the different services, service or platforms, whatever you want to call them, on Pluto, on any of these new other emerging platforms that keep launching. You can sell content to one of the services. You can sell content to an aggregator. You could partner with an OEM. Some of them were here today, or certainly their branding is outside, with their O&O channels. I mean, presumably, I think Graham was sort of saying kind of everything's an option, but presumably kind of you can look at these opportunities, value them their own way, and they each have their own merits.
And I think Graham has made a very good point that you would take this on a commercial case-by-case basis. You know, typically for our fast channel distribution, we're looking at non-exclusivity. So for us to launch our 21 unique fast channels and then syndicate to 80 streams, we've taken that as a view is that we want to work directly with platforms, and we want to make sure that, of course, when we're working with platforms, that we're looking at every different avenue of distribution. So whether it is acquiring a third-party fast channel that we're programming, maybe there's also an opportunity to work with them on their owned and operated channels where it could mean content licensing. So, of course, at that stage, we would be working with local sales directors to think about potential licensing opportunities there. So I think it really does complement each area of distribution. And we've also seen, of course, if there is a fast channel live on a certain platform and there is also a VOD offering, then there could well also be a halo effect seen on both areas of those distributions. So there really are, it's a distribution mix. And, you know, this really is just something that we continue exploring on, again, a case-by-case basis, but working with all of those major connected TV platforms.
Right. So even though currently you're going sort of far and wide, distribute as wide as you can, still there would be options for you if an OEM came along and said, let's launch a Peaky Blinders, for want of a better example. It would certainly never work, would it? Because no, they wouldn't let you. But a channel, you could theoretically have that discussion in the same way that the Fremantles and the other world have lit up these channels with them.
I think we continue to be platform agnostic as a company, and again, taking these commercial decisions on a case-by-case basis.
Great. At this stage, I can turn to the crowd. Anyone got any questions here for Shaun at this stage? There's one right here. I think they will have a mic for you there.
Hi, it's Ben Woods at Media Research. I wanted to ask about how you think about the relationship between exclusive new content and fast channels. I think there's been some good examples of how, for example, ITV had their live World Cup broadcast and they supported it with fast channels of World Cup classics. It seemed like a really good way of extending engagement time. I was just wondering, does Banijay think about that when it's selling library content or when it's commissioning content at all with fast?
Well, I think when we're thinking about either cutting exclusive deals with platforms or exclusive channels for a particular window, the commercial models obviously would need to reflect that. And I think typically what we're seeing in the fast channel space is a lot of those commercial arrangements, either revenue share agreements or advertising inventory split agreements. And I think should there be a level of exclusivity, then there may need to be a change in the commercial model. So currently, of course, what we're focusing on is back catalog distribution with such an array and mass of catalog. We're starting there, but of course, and if there is a commercial model in place for exclusivity, then of course we'd have a look at that too.
Anyone else in the crowd? I guess that's a good. Oh, sorry, right here.
Hi, Shaun. I'm Venkat. If I have to put a plot between, let's say, revenue monetization and the number of hours, programming hours on a channel, and you mentioned 150 hours, let's say, for example, as the critical mass for a single IP channel, etc. How does that look like? I mean, let's say, if 150 hours becomes 300 hours, does it or did it necessarily grow the revenue in that order? I mean, any insights there?
That's a really good question. And, you know, when thinking about content refresh, we won't necessarily have a static structure where 25% refresh month on month. It'll be, again, on a case-by-case basis. I think, of course, naturally, we do see viewership increase when we offer more content on our channels. It's then how we market those channels as well with the platforms or using our own social media accounts as well to cross-promote. But then, of course, we need to be very mindful of, we would hope viewership increases, but then also advertising fill rates and advertising CPMs would then, of course, be lifted. So it's certainly part of the mix, and we certainly strongly recommend having a content refresh. But then to see the linear graduation of more revenue, more viewership, more content, I think there's more of a cadence to advertising fill rates and then also advertising CPMs, so market by market.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the audience? Yeah, I've got one. So how, as Banijay, it was interesting when you launched Horizons, powered by Banijay, as a rights business, distribution business, how are you going about kind of launching effectively brands and even though obviously some of them are program brands, but getting your content discovered and getting those services discovered? I guess it's the old discoverability question, which critical to success, of course.
I think discoverability in the fast channel space is certainly something that every distributor, every platform has to focus on. And the way that we're taking this with each platform that we work with is we're certainly working towards marketing plans and programming strategies and aligning against those key tentpole moments of the year that a platform may have marketing planned for. How can we support that with our own programming efforts, with our own channel launch efforts? Is there a way that we can, of course, have a halo effect there? And then discoverability off platform very much is working with our owned and operated digital accounts. So that could be our social media pages, where we have social media pages dedicated to some of these major formats, which not only will be thinking about distribution strategies for those dedicated pages, but also how we can cross-promote. And it really is, again, about having a marketing mix and I would say a 12-month marketing calendar, which you can really tap into at any given time.
So the world of a distributor is well and truly changed in terms of the skill sets that you need nowadays to do these things effectively.
And absolutely, you know, from a Banijay perspective, we are gaining new talent, and we're also gaining new skill sets within the company. So we've got people programming the channels, we've got people preparing the files for the assets to then send to the facilitators, and then we've got those people working in the data and the marketing. And of course, from sales and distribution, it really is now becoming an all-encompassing in-house operation.
Great. So, unless there are any other questions, I'm going to jump in and just ask the very simple question: what's next for 2023? Maybe what's next in terms of channels, and maybe what's next in terms of maybe any new sort of platform service relationships that you think, what may happen with that?
Well, for us, absolutely continuing to launch premium quality fast channels, and that'll be across those existing markets that we've already entered, and we're certainly going to be looking at new markets to enter as well this year. And then in terms of course, platform relations, expanding our current portfolio and looking at those emerging and new opportunities which may arise with those platforms too.
Great. Well, perhaps you could all join me in thanking Shaun. Yeah, well, that's it. That's time. Thank you.